Hello everyone, and welcome to Blue Mondays, the GLORIO blog's Eureka 7 recap podcast. The ending is in sight, the finish line is within reach. We are in the 40s now, and that's kind of scary, honestly. We have come a long way through this show.
I agree, it is pretty scary to be in your 40s.
Ouch. Man, just turning the knife there. I am your host, Zigg. I am joined, as always, by my co-hosts, Mr. Mean Aquagaze.
Mr. Mean? I'm like Mr. Self-Deprecation.
That's all of us. You can't
I'm 32.
just claim that. Yeah. I am also joined, of course, by the lovely G. Hello, G.
How old is Norb actually? Because he looks pretty young. Like, I was about, we're talking about 40s, the end of the road here. Is Norb even 40? Like, considering how young he is in that flashback?
Because they talk, like, the period of time they talk about passing in this show is 40 years, so Norb has to be in his mid-50s.
Oh, so it is explicitly... Okay, I must have missed it's been 40 years.
Yeah, a couple of times they do explicitly mention that he has not seen Sakuya for 40 years.
Okay, so, my bad. That's me.
So I would guess Norb's age somewhere between, 54 to 56.
So he is actually a realistically aged adult, is what you're telling me.
I mean, I would argue that you would probably look a little more careworn at that age.
He's got them Vodarac monk techniques,
I mean, also the bald head does a lot of covering up for...
As they say, Vodarac don't crack.
Indeed. Well done. I think that will probably be the episode title there.
I mean, he is realistically aged as opposed to every other adult in this show who is simultaneously 19 and 32.
Right. Dewey at the ripe old age of, leading his military coup at 29.
Yeah, the young man Dewey.
I mean, they compensate for it by being, 6 years old mentally.
Yeah.
This episode, we are covering episode 41, Acperience 3, and episode 42, Star Dancer. We're moving into a sort of an interesting new style of storytelling here. We've had a whole bunch of very plot-oriented episodes beforehand. These episodes are a little bit more raw, emotional storytelling, I think we've got here.
Yeah, we get to the first episode of the two does a very particular thing in that it is essentially the Norb and Sakuya flashback episode, but it tells the flashback from two different perspectives, with Norb telling his side of the story to Renton and Sakuya telling her side of the story to Eureka.
Yeah, I mean, structurally, it's a fairly common trick, but I think it works quite well. Let's get into it then. Let's dive into episode 41, Acperience 3. Just like previous Acperience episodes, this is named after a track by the German group Hard Floor. See back to our previous episodes for the full lowdown on them there. But yeah, I mean, first impressions of this episode, Aqua, you were talking about the dual structure of this episode, right?
Yeah. And I think what mostly stands out to me in this episode is that it doesn't necessarily focus on why Norb failed, right? Because up until now, he has always been sort of framed as the proto-Renton, the guy who was supposed to do what Renton is doing now. But,
I mean, the idea of somebody who fails more than Renton is truly mind-boggling, honestly.
But, failed in being the chosen one, right? Yeah. And I had expected this story to be about, how they attempted to have what Renton and Eureka have and sort of, and how that sort of fell apart through some circumstance or another. But in the end, and I'm not sure if this is a positive thing or not, it is just sort of they kind of were like Renton and Eureka, he was a naive young lad and they met each other sort of by accident, and she never showed any emotion, and he taught her how to come out of her shell, and they fell in love, and they tried to go beyond the Great Wall and into the zone, but it didn't work. And why did it not work? Because they didn't have the nerve ash, they didn't have the MacGuffin.
Well, we'll get to that in due time. I'm not quite so sure it's that clearly cut.
Well, I think maybe what's interesting about this episode and the way the storytelling goes is, I think I think on the like material level, it is correct to say that yes, that the lack of the nerve ash is the like materialistic linchpin that makes transcending the zone possible.
I mean, that's literally what Norb says as like the explanation, right? I know it's other stuff as well. But I think he does say it in the second of these two episodes.
No, he doesn't actually.
Well, I mean, he's like, okay, fine. He muses, right? He wonders if look, man, if the old wise man wonders, I wonder if the mech that's the star of our show.
I mean, we'll get to it when we'll get to it, but like, yes. I have a few alternative theories.
Sure. Well, that's kind of where I'm leading to. Is I think thematically and emotionally, kind of the read on this episode is that, like, Norb and Sakuya's quote-unquote failure is in many ways a thing that was out of their control, right? Their failure was a result of a lack of time, a lack of support, like, networks, right? Like, you compare Norb and Sakuya to Renton and Eureka, and it's like, well, what do Norb and Sakuya lack? Well, they didn't have enough time to truly, like, come to know one another, but also the contextual conditions of how they found each other, as part of a, like, rigid religious order means that, like, in many ways they were rushed into the moment, right? Like, they were not like they did not have the support of like a found family or social support network, right? They were pushed into it by a religious order that never took the time to really understand, like, what these two meant to each other, right? And I think you can kind of read that as part of also, like, what it is that, Norb and Sakuya were missing, quote unquote, right? There's also, I think, an element of, like, when Norb is looking at the nerve ash, I think it is also quite notable that the three children are also in the shot with the nerve ash.
So that's what I was going to go for there.
And I think you could read that as, like, is it not necessarily like, oh, you have to have kids to transition?
No.
But as much as you need bonds, right? You need familial bonds. You need bonds, like, you need close bonds with people in the world to truly, like, have what it takes, quote unquote, to transcend the zone.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think we'll loop back around to that when it comes up again. But that is in the second episode, so we'll get to that eventually. But speaking of the children, actually, at the beginning of this first episode, I think we do get a nice little touch here where Meta and Link are very distressed and don't want to leave Eureka, and Maurice steps up to the plate and takes them under his wing. And I think we've spoken a few times about how Maurice has sort of had a very background, sort of very small arc about how he's gradually growing in self-actualization and sort of becoming a fully rounded person, as opposed to just one of the three-headed monster that is Eureka's kids. And I think this is a nice another step forward in that. I think it's a good little moment for him as a character.
Just showing, like, because you might say it's like, oh, like, sure, there's no real stakes in this, but it kind of shows that he, like you said, is becoming his own person rather than just a part of the Holy Trinity, right? Yeah. And also just like not being as dependent on Eureka, right? Which in a way shows more trust in her than clinging to her and being like, no, we want to come with you, would actually do.
Right? Yeah, and this is a show about growing up and becoming a mature adult, and part of that is the realization that I think we all go through as children, that at some point you realize that the things that you want and the things that you desire are not the only thing in the world, right? That you realize that in this case, he realizes that Eureka has a good reason that she doesn't want to bring the children with her, and there's a realization that he can support her by leading by example, right? Like I said, I think it's been a subtle one, but we have seen some examples of this, of him sort of slowly actualizing himself as we go through the story there. So I just thought it was a nice touch to step off on here. speaking of self-actualization, we also learned that Hilda can fire a submachine gun one-handed upside down on full wrist extension. Which...
Look, she played a lot of Gears of War when it came out on Xbox 360. She knows how to blind fire.
Yeah. She also apparently has like wrists as strong as like an arm wrestling champion or something, because holy crap, man.
It's the future. They're using future guns.
Yeah, they're using recoilless, caseless ammunition or whatever.
This future gun that looks just like an MP5.
Yes.
Sorry, an airsoft replica of an MP5 because it's anime, yes. But, we've got a lot of classical imagery, classical religious imagery throughout these episodes. Obviously, the lotus blossom that is apparently Sakuya here is a flower that is steeped in the mythology of many religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, all sorts of stuff there, So we're laying it on pretty thick with the Vodarac as Buddhist stuff here.
And I think the lotus, right? Yes, as you say, has a lot of imagery here, but I think it's like it is one of those things of like it is almost like meta-contextual imagery, right? Because as we sort of find out in this episode, the lotus here is more representative of like the symbol of how Sakuya and Norb first kind of came to know each other, right?
Yeah.
As we learn in the flashback.
Yeah, there's symbolism which ties it both to their personal story, but also to her sort of, as we find out as the narrative goes along, her position as a saint, as a sort of sacred person to this religion that has grown up around her, And I think a lot of this episode and a lot of the Sakuya and Norb flashback is about the tension that they feel between Sakuya as a person and Sakuya as sort of this blessed religious figure, this messiah, and sort of the trouble and the difficulty that causes her and also Norb, right?
Yeah, I think there's like almost a like dark irony to this flashback, right? Where like even the way Norb is chosen, right? Like the subtext of you've been assigned as the caretaker of the saint is like, it's not like some he chose the right toy as a baby, he's the correct incarnation, as much as just I don't know, man, you seem like you'd be good at doing the dishes and sweeping the floors, right? And related to that, right? And that's from Norb's perspective, and then from Sakuya's perspective, right? If we were to like understand that, Sakuya, Eureka, and I guess every human or Corallian humanoid, right, is like something created by the Corallian to like interface with like humanity, then in many ways humanity kind of failed the test here with Sakuya, right? Because like rather than like teach her about human world, they immediately started worshiping her like a god. They placed her on a pedestal, right? They inherently, like from square one, they have already disconnected her from the human experience, right?
And as you mentioned earlier, the critical point of this relationship is the moment when Norb offers her a sign of human emotion and human connection, right? That's the thing which bridges the gap, is that he makes a small gesture out, against the rules, against sort of the teachings of his seniors, to sort of reach out a metaphorical hand across the gap towards her, and that's the moment that really starts everything off.
It's also just in general a nice subversion of the whole core idea of the show, where the Federation is always seen as the bad guys because they use the planet as represented by an enemy, in their case, as like a tool to subjugate and make submit to them. And we have always seen the Vodarac as the like, the good primitives who know the real way of living together with the planet. And in these couple of episodes, we learn that their approach, which is to like mindlessly venerate Earth, is not necessarily the right path as well, right? The right path is what Renton and Eureka are doing, to sort of like live together as equals.
Right, and this retrospectively makes the plot development that Norb is actually a heretic against his own people at the same time as being a saint, as like a great religious figure. It makes a lot more sense, right? Because he was chosen, he was a great figure, and then he sort of turned against the ethos, the belief of his own people, and that, I think that makes him, it sort of acts as like retroactive character development for him. It fills in a lot of the gaps in his personality. It explains why he is at the same time very devoted to the Vodarac and also sort of dismissive and kind of a shitty old man.
I mean, look, man, if you were raised in like an isolated like religious like compound your entire life, and you break out at like what 15, and the next thing you do is eat a pizza and smoke cigarettes, like I mean, of course there'd be no going back, man.
Yeah. I do want to speak a little bit about Sakuya here, in particular her voice actor. Sakuya is voiced by Akiko Yajima here. She is a voice actress of some note. She's probably most famous for the fact she was the original voice of the titular Crayon Shin-chan. She voiced him for 26 years, up until 2018. But she also has quite a repertoire of super robot roles under her belt. She was probably her most famous role other than Shin-chan. She was Relena Peacecraft in Gundam Wing. She was Dorothy Wainwright in The Big O.
Okay.
And she was also Sally in Brave Express Might Gain. So she has been around the block. Aqua, I regret to inform you, she was also Mipple in Futari wa Precure.
Oh, excellent.
So yeah, a veteran voice actress here. I think she gives a good emotional performance here, which I think is very important to the character here. And
as long as she wasn't Meppel. I mean, I'm pretty sure Meppel is also in this show, right? Because he's in everything.
Probably. Like voice actors show up in the darndest places, I swear. But we do. I think like the central conceit of this episode is that Eureka, in call it magic, call it mental, call it whatever, like meets Sakuya in the library that we have been seeing on and off since the early part of this show, right? This imagery has recurred again and again, and it keeps coming up whenever we come into close contact with the Corellians.
Yeah, I mean, it's an old kind of metaphor. Like the subconscious represented as a library is a kind of tried and true trope, but it sort of works here because they use the environment of the library to give Sakuya that book, like the little journal that is once again like kind of a hackneyed metaphor, but the show always kinds of pulls it off, especially when she gives it to Norb at the end. Is like, oh, my book, it is it has been entirely blank for the past 40 years, but what really matters is the heart at the beginning and the heart at the end.
Yeah, I mean, like, is it a cliche? Yes. Was it sweet? I thought it was pretty sweet. One thing I will say is you talk about like the library as a common metaphor for the subconscious. Whose subconscious do you think we are metaphorically in?
That is a good question, right? Because like on one hand, the lotus flower is Sakuya.
Yes.
But on the other hand, she also exists within the lotus flower. So, yeah, I don't particularly take Sakuya to be the bookish kind of type. So this might as well just be like a manifestation for Eureka's sake, right? That this is
bear in mind, we have seen the library when Sakuya was not involved at all.
Yeah. Like, this is like... I'm assuming this is like... I'm not really a fan of trying to like, make sense of why is it a library, but like, it's probably something like, they decided to make it look like this because this is a place where Sakuya and Eureka can meet, right? Like, it represents Eureka's inner world as much as it might Sakuya's.
So, like, the thing I'm going to suggest is the reason Sakuya and Eureka can communicate is because they are both explicitly part of a greater entity, right?
You could argue they are the same entity.
So whose unconscious is this library meant to represent? Perhaps it's the Corallian.
Yeah. It contains all the knowledge of the world. It's the Gaia library.
Yes. I mean, it is literally that. It is literally that, So, yes, the symbolism is something which has recurred throughout the show, right? And I do really like, I think that when you do kind of like the magical plot exposition dump episode like this, there's always a temptation to make it very somber and mystical, and I do like instead that we have a very sort of girly sleepover conversation vibe between Sakuya and Eureka. It makes it more relatable, it makes it more human, it means that the bursts of emotion that show through feel more authentic and more earned, rather
it's
than
also because that is what matters, right? That is what this is about. It is not about the lore and all the puzzle pieces falling into place. It is about the human emotions and the joy of a teenage love and where it can take you as a person. So they did a really good job at indeed showing that this is how these two characters became human, right? And now they can have a human conversation the way two teenage girls would have with one another.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, is that it does infuse the humanity and the relatability of a very common real world situation into a fantastically unreal situation that they are in here. I think that there's lots of good little callbacks and sort of references across the as they sort of tell this parallel narrative. There's also another parallel, which is there's lots of deliberate callbacks to between the relationship between Norb and Sakuya and Renton and Eureka. Like Sakuya says he was the one who taught me how to smile, which is something which has been said several times about Renton and Eureka, right? And yeah, there's just sort of I think they do a good job of tying these two couples together, not just through arcane plot mechanics, but also through kind of a more believable emotional bond. Do you have any feelings about sort of the Sakuya Norb stuff that's expressed here?
As someone who definitely did not as concretely recall a lot of this the first time I watched it, I found this episode to be quite charming, right? Especially compared to the prior two Acperiences. I think using Sakuya as one of the two primary storytellers here really works in this one's favor, right? It makes it feel much more relatable, as you said, right? Almost slumber party vibes to it, right? Almost on both ends, right? Even Renton and Norb's out in the real world, it's Norb is almost Norb should have a cigarette and beer in hand.
Yeah, I was going to say there's some real. Let me tell you some stuff, kid.
This guy's rose.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say there is one definitely not intentional, but quietly funny to me implication of this flashback, right? Which is yes. So Sakuya was this sort of emotionless, disconnected being because she was raised in this rigid religious hierarchy and only found her humanity through the spark of spontaneity in the form of Norb. That makes a lot of sense, right? Treated as a saint, unable to make personal connections. What's the gecko's excuse for not being able to form a single meaningful emotional connection with Eureka for the years in which they flew together as a crew?
Have you seen them?
I know. It's just
also remember most of Eureka's quote unquote formative years were spent under the rigid control of a military scientific program.
Right, I know, but it's just once she got broken out, right? It's you're telling me not a single member of the Gecko state was able to make her flash even the barest of a smile in the 5 years they were flying together.
She clearly has an emotional relationship with Holland, right? But the precise it's not romantic, and it's not Holland, not a great guy to show you the wonder of human tenderness, right? He's not really majoring on that stuff.
I think this is just a bit of like boomer writers being like, well, clearly these adults can't possibly relate to Eureka. Only a, young man of her own age is the only one she can have a meaningful connection with. Like,
okay, you're telling me not even Eureka's adopted children could make her smile?
That's the thing, right? I think the kids are like we're like the first step.
Of course, right. Yes. I am mostly just poking fun at the situation.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth pointing out that in the first episode, the Gecko State are surprised to see Eureka smile, but they don't act like it's the first time she's ever done that, So
fair enough,
right? Because in the first episode, Eureka also isn't like a Rei Ayanami sort of like she is a bit.
She has some emotion,
right? Yeah. She's a bit uptight, but she has emotions. She can get upset. She can smile. She can like snark at Renton.
So I think in the case of Eureka, the kind of like the first person to teach me how to smile is a bit more figurative than ritual,
of course, yes.
But it's I do like as well the way that like we don't get a huge amount of insight into like the Vodarac belief system here, but we do get enough to know that they kind of want the same thing from Norb and Sakuya that we want from Renton and Eureka, right? That they want them to cross the Great Wall and, quote, rid the negative chains we have with the land, right? That they realise that Sakuya's job is to sort of repair their connection to the scub coral. And I just found it interesting that, we kind of get to see that mission from a much more religious standpoint as opposed to like the very scientific, fact-based standpoint that we have mostly seen the job through on the Gecko side, right? Like, obviously there have been religious overtones all along, but it's interesting to see a purely faith-based interpretation of it.
Right. I think the Gecko crew have always been sort of in the middle. Like, you have the like very scientifically oriented characters like Dr. Bear or Misha, even they like differ in their opinions. But I think like the overall Gecko State like reason or ideology is just because they know that it is inherently wrong what the Federation is doing to the planet, right? It is not necessarily steeped in like a deep religious conviction or in a like scientific facts. It's a sort of like moral, ethical reason that they have.
Yeah. Perhaps my phrasing was a little off there, but I think from the point of view of the story, right? The Gecko crew have always been fairly certain about what they need to do because it's the story and we are observing the story, so it's interesting to see kind of like the story approached from a different perspective slightly there. I want to talk a little, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I want to talk a little about the fact that the episode does not actually tell us why Norb and Sakuya failed. Do you guys have any sort of interpretation as to why this went wrong, as to what went wrong here?
I think G sort of hit the nail on the head, right? Like, that was the big question I was left with at the end, but I wasn't necessarily chomping at the bit for a concrete answer. But I think that what G said in that they tried to challenge the Elite Four before getting all the gym badges, right? They tried to do what is their destiny, but they failed to see that the actual point of bringing Sakuya to the planet, or like incarnating her as a sort of vanguard or representative of the scub coral in its entirety, that the point was not necessarily to cross the Great Wall, but the point is for her to make human connections, for her to convince the rest of the world of the need to coexist and then cross the Great Wall. And what the Vodarac did instead was isolate her in the belief that merely crossing the Great Wall was enough.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a like means to an end here sort of situation, right? Where, as you say, I think in some ways the Vodarac only saw the win condition as, I don't know, send those two through the wall, right? But like, there's a little bit of like God only helps those who help themselves sort of like vibe here of like, you have to win over the people, right? Like what is the point of creating a human avatar of the scub coral if that avatar does not take in the human experience, does not speak to humans, right? Does not, not say like, go on the campaign trail but more like engage in the material world, right? Like that's in many ways why she was created, right? Was to become like, it's almost even, the scub coral realizing that like, we cannot merely like, interact in the spiritual or whatever dimension they exist in, right? Like that to be a part of this existence is to be a part of the material world, and that is just as important as, whatever is happening on the other side. Or who knows? Maybe Norb shouldn't have grabbed that compact drive. Maybe it's
difficult
literally that simple.
I mean, I think that's I think both of you have like really solid and good takes on it there. I think I'm interested if you think that is the decision that they do not actually reveal why. Do you think this is good storytelling, or do you think it's a cop out?
I think it's perhaps both a bit. Like I like that it's being left open for interpretation, because it's clear that you can interpret it in ways that are both like very practical and like dry, as in, oh, he shouldn't have grabbed the crystal, or they didn't have the nerve ash, or in ways that are more thematic, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, I kind of feel as if maybe it doesn't benefit the way Norb has been sort of portrayed in this show. If it doesn't really benefit the fact that the show doesn't seem to really take a thematic side and justifies of like, this is why we have a character who did or attempted to do the same thing but failed. Because normally when you have something like that, you tend to do it because you want to show where that character failed, whereas the main character will do it right this time. And I'm not saying it's not necessarily bad, but it is surprising to me that the show doesn't take a more explicit stance on like, this is why Norb failed, the way it does do with Holland, for example, right? They hammer home time and time again why Holland cannot be the chosen one, why it has to be Renton. And with Norb, it's a little bit more wishy-washy. I think there are strong thematically resonant interpretations you can have, but it is somewhat uncharacteristic of this show to not make it clear to the audience that this is the interpretation you're meant to have. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. I just say it's a bit atypical.
It is a choice, right?
It is atypical for this show, right? In a way that makes me perhaps, surprised, not necessarily disappointed, but just sort of, surprised, I would say. Like, I didn't expect them to put it all out there like this.
Yeah, G, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think, I think, like, if you want to, like, be cynical about it, is this a little bit of a writer's cop-out, right? To be like, well, the world works in mysterious ways. But I do think that has always kind of been Eureka 7's purview, right? Like, Eureka 7 has never been, well, at least this incarnation of the TV show at this point in time has never been a particularly lore-heavy work, right? Like, this is a feelings like anime, right? This is a big feelings mecha anime. This is not a in UC 78, et cetera, right? And
so what you would say is that unlike other mecha anime, this one is about the characters.
Yeah, this one's about characters, exactly.
I'm going to ban that
feelings.
joke eventually.
But no, I think, and also because we are dealing with like the sort of, even now, right? Like, hell, I would say even by the end of the show, you're never going to have like a particularly like bullet pointy explanation of the scub coral or how the corallians like function, right? It is meant to be a little unknowable. It is meant to be a sort of meeting of spiritual and material. And so,
I mean, we've spoken a lot about how the show uses and co-opts a lot of religious imagery, and as you know, a certain if you're going to deal with religious themes at a certain point, part of that is just having faith, right? Sometimes you have to have faith. You know, I mean, like, I'm kind of with you, Aqua. I think that it's a very interesting creative choice, right? I think that, and it is very clearly a choice. I think that there are arguments both ways. You know, ultimately it's not super important. There's a couple of things that I wanted to sort of bring up as possible theories as well. You know, I think to me the thing I sort of read in their relationship was that perhaps they failed because their relationship felt uneven. You know, I think that although Norb clearly loved Sakuya and she loved him, there seemed to me to be like there was still a power imbalance. You know, like in a certain sense, he couldn't get her off the pedestal completely to himself.
Right. I mean, there's also really the question that Sakuya never really had the opportunity to meet other people.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You know, but that was just sort of a theory there. You know, the other theory I kind of want to raise is the idea that like we see when Norb returns to reality with the compact drive, and you know, Sakuya says when she was, you know, consumed and turned into the flower, you know, she says, "Oh, but I learnt you were coming," and I feel like there's some implication there that Eureka exists because Norb and Sakuya got close enough that the scub coral decided it might be worth trying again. Right?
Like, that Sakuya was never really supposed to be one, but more like a vanguard, maybe.
Not even that, you know. I think that it's more that just kind of like the scub corals saw that they were almost there, you know, they were onto something, and so like they decided, okay, we will send someone else, you know, we will try this again. We will give humanity a second chance to connect with us, and perhaps it will work out better this time, you know. So like I don't think that there's a huge amount of text to support that idea, but it's interesting to think about, right? Just in terms of like the scub coral giving humanity a do-over. You know, I like the idea of it. Again, that's just a personal theory, but
I mean, it's definitely clear that both Sakuya and Eureka are sort of like the scub coral realizing that they have to communicate in a different way than sending down Corellian, QT-class Corellians and murdering a bunch of people to show that people shouldn't be messing with the planet, right?
Right, yeah. And I think overall the thing I want to say about this episode is that it just has good vibes. You know, I think that they strike a good balance between, you know, tragedy. There's some good like little bits of light comedy. I like how young Norb is basically just Renton, like complete with super klutziness and social awkwardness. And just kind of like, you know, you get there's the bittersweetness that you want from an episode about like a long lost love. Right? You get that. You get that sort of like happiness, sadness, and wistfulness all melded together, and I think that's the takeaway from this episode I have. You know, that like emotionally it hits the spot, even if like it doesn't necessarily sweat the details. I think that's probably a strength rather than a weakness here. We must also, of course, sadly pour one out for littlest cancer patient Eureka, now finally consigned to history. We are now in the, you know, because you're worth it, Eureka stage.
Well, I think to be clear, right? Like, okay, like, yes, we could all, like, we had this conversation last time. I didn't say anything at the time, right? But I think this episode, like, I mean, again, so it is very obvious that they are not drawn as prominently once she comes out of the lotus flower.
But I was going to bring this up next episode, actually.
But I do think it is, like, I still think they, like, broadly do the work, right? You know, they have this conversation where before Eureka leaves, you know, Sakuya's like, oh, you're looking pretty rough there. Like you want like a like I can fix that. And I think it's important that Eureka says no to it, right? That she's like, I earned these scars, right?
I think it's maybe the most cliche plot element in a fairly cliche heavy episode, but it works and it's there for a reason, right? Like
yeah, but she still cures the scars.
They are.
They draw her. She does still have them, but
they are drawn at like 50% opacity or something.
Yeah. She doesn't look as like gangly as she used to anymore. This is like having your cake and eating it too.
Yes,
a little bit. Yes,
I do think that there are still prominent shots. Like if you are paying attention, like she still has the scarring on her back. Like the scarring is there. It is just that yes, they are kind of trying to, yes, as you say, have their cake and eat it too. By yes, just. Like if I'm looking at a screenshot here, it's almost just like what they've actually done is they're no longer they're just using a lighter color to draw the outlines of the scars that they did in previous episodes.
It also helps that now that she's gone back to long hair, that
it covers some
forehead one can be covered. But like the scene's important. Like I think it is important that her look changes, because this is sort of like Eureka's look changed before because it represented a turning point for her character, right? A moment of weakness that caused her to become more introspective and self-interrogating, and now this is kind of like, this is another turning point for her character, right? Like, she has her mission, she's determined, she has sort of internalized her love for Renton. She is reborn in a certain sense, and I think that I think it's a good look for her. It's a bit more. Obviously she looks a bit more like she originally did now, but with the hair down, she's a bit more casual, a bit more loose. She looks a little older.
She looks a little bit more like Renton.
Yes, I mean, like, look, it's hard to draw hair, but she looks more human.
Yeah,
that's the thing, and I think that there's some value to be had in even simplistic visual storytelling like that, right?
It's it's sort of meant to show that this is like a do-over of the last time she changed appearance, which was of course a very traumatizing experience for her. And this is her basically doing the same thing again, right? Once again, trying to step into the inner world of the scub coral, but this time she comes out unscathed. Because
Sakuya even says you tried to return before, didn't you?
I mean, which does put that little incident where she became a slime in like some pretty dark light, right?
I mean, I think even at the time, we accepted it was sort of a form of spiritual suicide, right? Mm-hmm. Like, but yeah, this represents, as you say, sort of a more positive outlook for her, and I think in that sense, making her more traditionally bishoujo again is acceptable. If
very like video game, you get a new outfit before fighting the final boss kind of.
Look, man, we got like 10 episodes left, right? Yeah. It's time for it's time for everybody to lock in their final costumes.
Yeah.
The last thing I just want to point out about this episode that is not like do not want to get into the like lore analysis, blah blah blah, whatever, right? But I just think on a visual level, and it does relate to the storytelling. I do think it is somewhat interesting that Sakuya, who I don't even know if she's necessarily implied to be the first human Corallian, but like an earlier iteration of this concept than Eureka or Anemone, right? And a big aspect of her character design that we haven't talked about, right, is that she has like what appears to be multiple compact drives like placed on her body, right, including the one that Norb grabbed that may or may not have ruined the ritual, who could say, right? And I kind of also like that just as a character design thing because it almost implies a little bit of like, oh, was Sakuya a prototype of this concept, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like,
that's
the Corallian had not quite like dialed it in yet. Yeah.
In general, she looks a little bit more alien than even Eureka, right? Eureka is already like one step removed from quite being human, and I think that's a good point actually, G. That she seems just that little bit more alien, as you say, and that does do well to sell her as kind of like an earlier model of human.
It does seem to imply a sort of link with the LFOs, right? Like,
yes,
that this is like the next step in human form of the Corellian.
I mean, we've seen that the archetypes have those sort of like weird green bulges along their arms and legs, right? And there are definitely shots in this episode where, Sakuya is glowing with power and stuff, where you can see that resemblance quite strongly.
Right, there's almost that implication, right, that like the scud coral like looked at an LFO or was like, okay, how do we get this like more like
compact?
Right, like okay, humans look like this, and this is what we have. Like, how do we like squish this into the shape of a girl?
Let's kit bash this human together.
But I think it is a neat way to communicate, like visually.
Yeah. Good little bit of visual storytelling. Yeah. Just like this episode, full of nice touches. I don't think that there's anything truly revolutionary in the storytelling that they're doing here, but it's done with heart. It's done with a lot of like attention to detail, and this is a good sort of like a good example of some of those tropes done right.
Yeah, it's definitely not as much of a trip as the other Acperience episodes. But I get why they gave it that title,
Yeah, I mean, like, I think, like, we've obviously, for the other two episodes, we've gone big on how trippy they are, but all of the Acperience episodes have been about, like, directly communicating with the Corellian in some way, right? And this is another step in that, right? It's just
strong character moments.
This time they are doing it through a more familiar, human-like face there. With that, let's move on to episode 42, Star Dancer. So, I'm not going to ask you about the musical reference for this one, Aqua, because it's fairly convoluted, although interesting here. So, I'm not sure how to approach this. So, let's start from the top down. So, in the past, we have talked about the Detroit-based musical collective Underground Resistance.
Yes.
If any of you guys recall that, they've been, connected to some of our previous artists, Jeff Mills, Galaxy to Galaxy, several others there. So, their main label is Underground Resistance, but they also, for much of the 90s, had a sub-label called Red Planet, and that sub-label exclusively released singles, 12-inch singles, that were credited to The Martian. So this song actually comes from a 1993 12-inch single called Cosmic Movement / Star Dancer. It's a double A-side single there. So there's no real consensus over who actually made this track. The named producers on the liner notes are Will Thomas and Martian 44, both of which are pseudonyms. The suspicion is that the actual producer was Mad Mike Banks, who was one of the founders of Underground Resistance, and has cropped up a couple of times in the past when we've talked about stuff there, but kind of like this is like real sort of like super underground electronic music ephemera, and that's interesting, but it's also almost impossible to sort of connect the dots unless you do dedicated research into it. So I wasn't about to make you do that, but it's fascinating, and I will say that, like, looking up a bunch of these has given me some real insight into, like, the weird world of, like, indie electronica.
I mean, it's this kind of thing where, like, that whole scene sort of looks at music production and distribution very differently from the mainstream pop scene, right? Because music was supposed to be circulated by DJs playing it at parties rather than necessarily released to the wider public and to the radio. So you had like labels and having a far bigger impact, I think, on the overall market, and as a result, you had a much more sort of loose approach to your identity as an artist, which is why so many of these guys used a bazillion different pseudonyms and work together with this guy under that name and then work together with another guy under a different name.
That is a recurring motif that like whenever I find a guy, it turns out they've released albums under like 5 different names or something like that. But I promise that we are coming up on some more obvious ones in the next couple of weeks.
This is even a thing in the like electronic music that made it mainstream in the 90s. identities, right? Like Apex Twin and Fatboy Slim also have like 5,000 different pseudonyms.
Yeah, and like a lot of like the Eurodance stuff from the late 80s and early 90s was like all produced by nameless producers, featured nameless singers. The only
even
thing that mattered was the track.
The quote unquote faces of these projects were often not the people who made it.
It's but it's fascinating. As somebody who is mostly familiar with the very traditional, like artist / band model, it's been interesting looking into some of this stuff there. Anyway, my first note on this episode is that in fact it's way harder to see Eureka's scars now, but we've already discussed that. We get some parting words from Norb, which I've just written here are very, very Buddhist coded, right? Like a lot of meetings and partings are necessary. New things will come from new meetings, and
very
there,
very like plot conventions say that I must now leave you behind coded.
It does. It is a little Kingdom Heartsy. Brackets derogatory ? I'm not sure.
My job here is done, but you didn't do anything.
One could argue that Kingdom Hearts' greatest mistakes was being a big feelings game that also simultaneously decided to become a big lore game at the same time.
Yes. We cannot get into that here because that's a whole separate podcast.
Well, you can tell that Eureka 7 really is a mecha anime in this episode because Sakuya has to divert energy from shields to open the portal to the zone.
Yes.
You can also tell that it is a mecha anime because Dewey has the inevitable moment in any mecha anime villain arc where the crew are like, "But sir, our own ships are there," and
shoot
Dewey's
through
like,
our
"Fuck
guys."
them kids."
I mean, it's kind of weird since they've shown the Ageha squad as being completely ruthless up until now. Like, they haven't had any problems with blowing up civilians or their own ships so far. So it's kind of weird that they're the ones being like, "But sir, we cannot do that."
Well, I think there's a two-part thing, right? There's the fact that they are still children, right? I mean, heavily indoctrinated children, but they are children. And there is also maybe the fascistic thinking of like, well, when we unleashed, the Corallian, those were, the poors, right? The plebeians. But now we are going after good, Dewey-fearing soldiers, people who have made the oath to your cause, and that could make even diehard loyalists,
not quote unquote our guys versus quote unquote their guys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I also think this is just like a very standard piece of storytelling formula to have like the dudes who have been completely ruthless up till now express shock just to like sell how
far Dewey
shitty
has
a
gone.
move this is there, in the meantime, things are going great with Anemone and Dominic. So great in fact, that she started shooting herself full of the evil woman juice.
It's very good, and by very good I mean very sad and appropriate for this part in the story, right? Where as Renton and Eureka stocks go up figuratively, right? As they become more loving, more the more they recognize each other's needs and the mutual understanding they've come to, Anemone sinks lower and lower into her self-loathing, her desperation for validation, right? Like,
I am selling off all my anemone stock. Out of anemone.
No, man, I'm hodling. I'm hodling. We're going to the moon eventually.
Yes, no. Now is the time to buy anemone stock. Buy the dip. Buy trust me, bro. I have it's not called insider tradings. I know a guy who knows Daisato. All right, just. But no, in all seriousness, right? Like, it's like, it's not a huge part of this episode, right? But just the reflection of Dominic and Anemone's relationship, right? They have grown increasingly distant as Dominic has repeatedly failed to protect Anemone, to he's
stand up for her.
Stand up for her, right? Mm-hmm. Like, even if he recognizes her humanity and seems to genuinely have real empathic feelings about her well-being, he has yet to develop the willpower, the strength of will to defend her, right? And so, it is very sad and pitiable that Anemone, who once took the evil woman juice, kicking and screaming, has like sunk to this level of acceptance of her lot in life, right? Like, well,
yeah, it's very classically junkie coded behavior.
He only likes me when I'm an evil woman.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, it is, even though she is at the most stable and psycho we've seen her in quite a while in this episode, somehow she comes off as more pitiable than ever before, right? Like, even though she should be in full-on killer mode, she is just so utterly blown away in this episode that it's it really does make you feel more sorry for her than anything else there. We will get to that eventually, of course. Here's a chance to talk a little bit more about the Norb says something that says Renton and Eureka have something that he lacked, right? And yes, when he says it, it's, the show seems to be implying that it's the Nirvash, but as I said before, I think I have a slightly different interpretation of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already kind of like I guess we did sort of like leapfrog this part, but yes, I think again, again, if you wanted to be ungenerous, right, you could call this like wishy-washy. But I do think like part of like the big feelings aspect of Eureka 7, it is intentional that you look at the scene and maybe Norb's right, maybe not, right? Like maybe it really is just Nirvash, or maybe there is this nebulous, unspoken human connection that is the real key to, bridging the gap between Corallians and humans.
Yeah, I kind of like that they give you the choice, right? I think, the people who are more mechanically minded, and I don't mean in the terms of mecha, I mean in the terms of who are more interested in sort of like the mechanism of the plot, are given the Nirvash solution here, and those of us who prefer a slightly more spiritual / touchy-feely approach, which I think probably includes me, can say, well, no, he means the children, the found family, all of that kind of stuff there. So I like that they leave it open to interpretation.
Look, found family can't achieve supersonic flight speeds.
You need to watch more mecha shows, my dude, because definitely they can.
This is a well-known fact.
Okay, fine. What I mean is that 7-year-old children cannot achieve supersonic flight speeds.
Again, watch some mecha shows. Speaking of supersonic flight speeds, we also get Holland going for a sick mid-air transfer here.
Holland saw what Renton pulled off like 15 episodes ago. It was like, I can do it too. I swear I can.
Yeah. In fact, this entire episode is much funnier if you look at it as a concerted effort by Holland to still prove that he's cool, honestly.
Yes.
Yeah, by going out in a blaze of glory, he's definitely dead, you guys.
Yeah. They do lean pretty hard this episode in a way that it's meant to like communicate the stakes, but they kind of go maybe a little too hard into the like, say goodbye to all your friends, Renton and Eureka.
Like, Holland has been tripping over death flags left and right in the past couple of episodes, but now I'm convinced he's not gonna die.
Dude,
right?
he is like that dog that failed the like obstacle course, man. He's just like rather than jumping over like all those bars and going through the hoops, he is just like bulldozing through every death flag in his way.
Yeah, he's doing the chase sequence in Heavy Rain, missing all the prompts.
I think Holland's like hope, his logic here is that like if I just hit enough of these, like
it'll overflow and
the integer overflow will go back to 0.
Like, dude, chill out. You already got the girl. Like,
I mean, I think that I think that they do lay on the kind of like breaking of the fellowship stuff a little bit, but I think the intention is less to draw attention to Holland's death flags and more to kind of seed in you the idea that maybe Renton and Eureka are not coming back from this mission. We don't actually know that. They are passing into the unknown, metaphorically and literally there, so like obviously G and I know if they do, but we're not going to say for the moment there. But I think the idea here is to sell you on the idea that, they may be parted permanently, or at least, even if it's not death, perhaps that they will never see their friends again. Now, is that true? Obviously, we don't know yet, but and they do lay it on a little thick, maybe. But I think that's what they're trying to convey with sort of this emotional, and also, I don't think it is a spoiler to say that however the show ends, this marks, kind of like there is a demarcation here between traveling as a group. Right now, there are very clearly two separate plot strands that the show will have to follow. There is Renton, Eureka, and the children, and there is the remaining Gecko State members. And for better or worse, they are physically and sort of thematically divorced from each other at this point.
But I hope this is not the last we see of the Gecko crew. Like, I would feel bad if this is like how they go out.
I am happy to tell you that this is not the last we will see of the Gecko crew. That's not a spoiler. We will continue to follow the Gecko crew, the adventures of the Gecko crew.
This is still a mecha anime, and so while Renton and Eureka are in the touchy-feely plot dimension, somebody's got to fucking pilot these cool robots.
Yes, it's true.
Even in this episode, right? All jokes aside, right? Most of the action is focused on the plot of the Gecko State, right? Like the mecha action is mostly what you have the scene with Matthew, Hilda, and Holland, right? Then you have the Holland versus, scare quotes versus Anemone fight. Look, Holland puts in a real good effort. He's got some slick moves, but
this is a classic kind of like, everybody protect the X.
Yes. I love this trope. Like, honestly, there is nothing I love more than the trope of we have to break through the enemy lines. So just, fly the mothership straight into the maw of the enemy as all of your dudes are just like firing in every direction. It doesn't matter which direction they fire in because there are enemies in literally every direction. You're gonna hit something.
I do really like the detail that they choose to include, that when the Corellians emerge from the cute class, the Vodarac are psyched. It's like it's like angels have appeared, right?
Biblically accurate angels showing up.
Like everything about your religion has been proven to you to be true immediately, and then they start to kill you.
It's quite dark in some regards.
There's some good like bathos going on in this episode of the kind of like, oh, you've come, we love you, stuff. There's some, because one touch I really like as well is that once Renton and Eureka leave and it's just Norb and Sakuya, he immediately reverts back to klutzy type, sort of like weird, awkward young Norb again.
It's quite cute, right? You even have Sakuya like pouting and closing the lotus flower again, like a little like, have you not gotten any less dense over the course of 40 years?
And again, like it's funny and it sells them more as human characters rather than just like magical plot devices. I think it's very cute. I think it's hilarious that she says "my book" in English.
Yes. For some reason, it's like a thing in anime for characters to say like "my thing" in English
because it's cool. Like it's a well-known fact that Japan thinks saying things in English is cool, and who can blame them? Quite frankly.
My pace.
Yes. There's also like one really weird thing about this episode is the way they insist on defining the word poroloka, even though it is like completely pointless and like there's no need to actually define it.
Like I kept being like, is this like a reference to like is this another music reference? Like, is it just
not
like,
as far as I know?
Is there an electronica song called Poroloka or something?
As far as I can tell, it's a completely made up word.
Yeah, I'm assuming there was just one guy in the writer's room who was like, but we need to explain this, and they will just basically just let him cook.
Yeah, it's very weird. I think that, look, we talked about it earlier, but I think that Sakuya have it saying 40 years of blank pages and then drawing a heart on the first and the last page. It's super corny. I kind of love it.
Oh yeah,
it really
again,
gets you.
This is like the deepest thing ever when you're 14.
Yes,
Like it's, again, it's what how do they say in the Princess Bride? This is some true love shit, right? Like this is, this is this is the thing at its core I love about Eureka 7, right? Eureka 7 unironically believes that like the power of love can save us, right?
You are not immune to cringe displays of emotion. There. You know who is immune to cringe displays of emotion? Holland, because now he's a robot.
Oh yeah, his freaking his
mecha
headset.
helmet, which we do not actually get explained in this episode, but we will have explained in subsequent episodes. So I will hold off on it.
He's wearing the like fucking Nintendo Zapper targeting.
Right, it's like implied to be some sort of like neural interface targeting. Classic mecha shit, right? The whole like my physical controls aren't fast enough. I need to become one with the machine, right?
Yes.
It's classic stuff, right?
Anyway, there's a bunch of really impressive animation here where Holland kills a billion dudes.
Yes. As much as I described it as, like Anemone kind of spanking the shit out of Holland here, it is a cool sequence, right? Like it is always fun to watch, the old veteran ace in I don't know what the 909 actually is. Is it a grunt? Is it an ace custom? Whatever it is.
It's a mauve shirt.
Yeah, like holding its own at least for a little while against the crazy super prototype.
Yeah, it's Eureka 7's equivalent of like the G fluff, the gun tank and the gun whatever, like the things cannon, that the other guys in Gundam fly. Yeah.
Holland also mentioned that thing stowed behind the sub-pilot seat.
Yes.
The mysterious MacGuffin that is... So, I remember what it is. G, do you remember what it is?
Is it a smart pistol and a hacking knife?
It is not.
Okay. It's been a little bit.
I will say what it is simultaneously super underwhelming and sort of amazing is all I will say.
Is it just Holland's ref board or something? I swear to God.
No, I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say one way or another.
I must admit, I legitimately don't remember.
You'll have to find out with Aqua then.
All right. One more jar of piss.
Yes, it's another jar of piss. Yeah.
He saved a second one.
Yeah. I do like... There's a little bit here which I like, which is that Renton and Eureka, even after everything, after they're told they're the hope of everything, they can't bring themselves to leave everyone behind. They come to what they think is an inevitable doom. And the Nervash has to be like, "Fuck it, I'll do it myself," and just takes off without them. It's again a small character moment, perhaps a little bit of a cliche, but it works well under these circumstances there.
Yeah. I mean, it is just weird because it's like it is so obviously framed as if, oh no, Holland sacrificed himself for us, but like no, he didn't. Like we know he's not dead, and
I mean they also leave before his fake death. Like
right, but like narrative convention says like, oh, that's what they're sad about. Whereas, like, it would have been way easier to, like, hammer home the point a bit more that this might be the last time they see their friends again. Because honestly, before you guys mentioned it, I hadn't even considered it.
Really? Even though they give Renton the whole fucking, like, flashback
montage of the Gecko State crew. Yeah.
Which, to their credit, is pretty good at including everybody. They even include, like Gonzi, who we barely see in like wasn't jobs and stuff like that.
I mean, I interpreted that as more as like, oh, my friends give me the courage to, do what I must do.
It's not that, but but Anemone appears to be doing something right for once when she pursues.
Except not right, because the explicit orders were basically for her to like bum rush the Corallian before Eureka and Renton get there, and once again, her insistence on fucking with people instead of focusing on the mission has actually maybe
but she does definitely try to kill them when they're escaping.
Yes,
I do love how Anemone is like, "This is my mission. I must do this. Don't get in my way," and then gets distracted immediately.
Yeah. I mean, again, sanity has its advantages. Right?
Look, evil woman juice clearly does not address the other symptoms of ADHD. So
yeah, I look. The End's homing laser attack is incredibly stupid, and it's so cool. I love it whenever it shows up.
It is truly one of those moves that can only exist because it is built on the legacy of what mecha is as a franchise. Because even the classic Thanos Circus, one could argue, is quote unquote unrealistic. Like, homing missiles do not actually zigzag like that, but it's fucking cool. And so what's even cooler than missiles doing it? Lasers.
Yeah. Let's just pretend that she has dark side hidden inside that machine somewhere, But yes, it's super cool. I do like that we finally get to see the End's stupid wire claws actually do something.
I mean, it's pretty cool. She fucking Kratos.
She just so there is no conceivable way he should have survived.
Yes,
that, right? I'm going to say this is a very rare example of the show being lazy and going for cheap heat. Right, because there is absolutely no way he should have survived that. They're just doing it to try and psych you out.
I mean, characters surviving mecha casualties they have no right surviving has been there as early as mecha itself has been, right?
All mechs have a built-in protection pod, and you just have to push the button and it creates a shield that blocks all damage from the explosion.
I think the barest excuse you have, right, is well, if you look at it closer, one claw goes into the 909's waist, and the other one goes into its head. Yeah. And so I guess technically the cockpit, which is in the torso between those two, could conceivably survive.
Except that everything definitely explodes, and every other time we've seen an LFO cut in half, they explode.
They're super dead.
Yeah. And we do get all the robot blood and everything. It's a rare win for Anemone, which is immediately nullified because she gets blasted with the feelings beam. What do we make of the figures that Anemone sees when she is blasted with the feelings beam? I mean, I feel like there's a fairly obvious interpretation.
I mean, I think these are her parents, right? This is her past as being abducted by the military and becoming having probably Corellian juice injected into her to make her a fake Eureka.
Right. We even get the fake daddy reaching down to pick you up shot.
Yes.
There, So, I mean, it doesn't explicitly say, I'm not sure it ever explicitly says, but I think it's fairly obvious these are meant to be her parents, she is just hit with a concentrated beam of way more successful couples than you, and that shakes her so much that she is just left catatonic, which happens a real lot, I've noticed. Anemone just being left a sobbing vegetable happens really quite a lot.
I mean, she is supposed to be the Asuka analog.
I mean, it is again a part of what makes her such a pitiable character in this story, right? Is however you choose to read it, whether it's that she's the most unstable or the most traumatized, whatever, however you want to frame it. Despite her personality, right? Anemone is consistently probably one of the most emotionally vulnerable characters in this entire show. And,
I mean,
she
is coded as deeply unwell, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we get, as Renton and Eureka speed away into the zone, we get a few wrap-ups here. There is a really horrifying shot of just the street painted in blood. But
and Tiptery just coming out and being like, "Oh, it's raining sakura petals."
It's. I hope that they were deliberately going for weird contrasting moods there, because that's definitely what I get from it. So I will say that we don't see Norb and Sakuya again after this I always assumed that they died. How do you guys?
I mean, they have sort of ascended to a higher plane of existence where they can be together without it being weird.
Right, yeah, I guess like the Renton and Eureka seeing them in their vision sort of strongly implies that. Right, maybe died is the wrong word, but like they've moved on from this world.
Yeah, their job here is done.
Yes. Yeah, and Dewey reveals, like any good villain, that he has contingencies for his contingencies.
Yep.
And, don't worry, bro, everything is just going according to Keikaku. I have this fully in hand there. And yeah, let's talk about how this episode ends. With Renton and Eureka arriving at the Promised Land.
It is every anime plot twist ever. It was actually Earth all along.
So yes.
Japan.
Yeah.
So this is, I will say that, again, since G and I knew this was coming all along, it has been super funny to watch you try and like twist your way around. Like, oh, I thought this was Earth to begin with, but it turns out that X, Y, and Z. You've done that several times, and it's been super funny to watch from a distance.
Look, I'm sorry. The fact that they use yen as a currency should have been obvious all along.
Yeah,
it was the...
So we have. It's not entirely clear where we've gone, right? Like, we have arrived at Earth, but are we... Where are we? Have we, traveled through space and time? Are we still inside a dream?
Yeah, is Earth inside the planet?
I mean, these are all questions that will be answered as we move along, but I will say, it's a hell of a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
It's an incredible cliffhanger, and quite wisely they manage to avoid spoiling it in the next episode preview as well. But yeah, I mean, I think that we are basically in the last leg at this point. Like, this is kind of like where we are headed now. Renton and Eureka have crossed the Great Wall, and nobody knows what waits for them, and so the rest of this show for them is finding out what is the Promised Land and what awaits them there. And as for the Gecko side of the equation, well, we will have to see what they can do from back in the real world, so to speak. But I don't think that there's a huge amount to say about this other than laughing at it, but it really is like quite a twist. I remember when I first saw this, this was a real like forehead slapper.
Yeah, well, I think it's effective, but it's also like maybe something that is harmed a bit by the fact that it has been done a couple of times after Eureka 7 did it. And maybe also before, like I said, it was a classic anime twist. Yeah.
I mean, we literally take the phrasing from a movie from 1968. So,
yeah, that is true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, look, I do love a good, it was actually X familiar place all along twist, So whenever you get a well-executed one, I think that it comes out well. And I think it's given extra weight because, they have done such good world building on the world that we do know exists, and the fact that we have established that Earth that was did exist in the past of the setting sort of it's done a fairly good job at sort of like making you believe that is something that was out and away and not a possibility there, So again, I'm not going to reveal exactly what this supposed planet Earth is. All options are still on the table, but it's certainly quite a bravura way to kick off your last story arc.
Yeah, I mean, and also Eureka 7 generally doesn't do like big wham moments at the end of an episode, right? So this is a nice little change of pace.
It gets to have one as a treat.
Yeah.
We haven't really had a good end of episode twist since Renton realised he wasn't actually a ramen delivery guy. So another strong pair of episodes. I think these obviously were much more focused as we said at the beginning, on emotion rather than necessarily plot movement, which seems weird to talk about for episodes which do sort of launch us into our final configuration for the show. But I think the main thing I took away from this was sort of like, these are just good vibe episodes, like they make you feel love and affection for the characters.
Yeah. As many episodes of Eureka 7 do. But
yeah, I think I felt it more strongly here,
right.
however.
It just takes them in yet another, like, interesting direction, right? Once again, the show benefits greatly from the fact that it is four-core, blah, 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 blah,
Well, thank you for saying it before I did.
Yes.
But I don't always have to be the one who says it.
Again, as we move towards the end, it does enhance the feel that we have been on a long and twisting journey, right? And that, you can't really sort of fake that in a shorter show, really.
You can't take shortcuts. Some might try, but
you can say, look how far we've come, and we actually have come quite a long way, and so have the characters.
It's been almost a year, so I mean, for us, so
I mean, this was part of the reason why I decided I wanted to do this 2 episodes per podcast episode, right? Because it means we are watching this show in roughly real time, as people would have experienced it at the time, So you do sort of get that sense of ingrained affection, that sort of feeling of being on a journey with the characters. But any final thoughts from either of you?
We did it. We made it. We made it through the entire episode without making a single Norb pedophile joke.
I mean, like, she's a giant plant at this point. Can you really make?
Oh, you want to make it even weirder?
Yeah, honestly.
I think maybe it's just we're so inured to like the tropes of anime that like Sakuya being this sort of ageless eldritch being of sorts is just doesn't rate that highly anymore.
Actually, 114 years old.
I mean, look, if you wanted to open the like how old is Eureka really conversation, then we're going to have to go through like 20 years of Chan wars over that. So perhaps it's better we leave that box closed there. Yeah.
How long have you been 17?
On that heartening... Oh, God, no. Who's Jacob? Is Holland Jacob?
Ugh. Kinda. Is Holland gonna end the show imprinting onto Eureka and Renton's child, so she will fall in love with him when she grows up?
We cannot talk about Renton and Eureka's child. That is forbidden territory. I refuse to acknowledge Renton and Eureka's child.
Yeah, no. G actually has it right. We should leave immediately. Whoa, I'm so thrown off axis by just that whole idea. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a like, leave us a comment, let us know how you feel about Twilight AUs. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube. As always, I would like to offer my thanks to Aqua. Thank you, Aqua.
I saw a snail the other day.
Oh, shut up. I would like to offer my thanks to G.
Always glad to be on.
And I would like to thank you, the listener. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.